Same time, another judge in the Netherlands has finally ordered that Steinhoff be wound up or closed down and his assets used to settle some of its debts. Steinhoff has assets worth around 7 billion euros. It has debts of 10.2 billion euros. You do the maths. Rob Rose is the editor of Financial Mail, written a book on all of this. Rob, good afternoon to you. Do you agree with Zwelakhe Mnguni? Are we going to be able, or South African authorities rather, going to be able to prosecute Markus Jooste for the crimes that happened here?
Afternoon, Stephen. I do think that what's going to happen is that he will face accountability in these courts, and I think it's important that he does it. Symbolically, it's important that South Africa brings Markus Jooste to the book, given that the crime probably hurt a lot more South African investors than anywhere else. So I think ultimately accountability has to happen here. Any accountability is good, but I do think it needs to happen here as well.
How difficult would the case be? I mean, we know he's going to get the top lawyers. That's fine. But we know the company collapsed, and we know he's largely responsible for it.
From what I hear, the NPA is also hiring private prosecutors as well, because I think they realize the importance of getting this case right. So I think that in this case it'll be a well-contested case. I don't think we'll have the sort of disasters we saw in the state capture cases recently, fingers crossed. And I think that from what I hear as well, they're going to narrow in on a few charges that are perhaps more easy to prove than the entire massive 106 billion rand fraud, which I think could be quite labyrinthine and certainly take a lot longer to prosecute, and certainly give Markus Jooste many more avenues for review along the way. I think they want to reduce that potential for him to do that.
So, I mean, as far as we know, Markus Jooste is not in Germany at the moment. He's in, what do I call it, the enclave of Hermanus, Rob? So he's there. Does that mean that if we want to prosecute him, if our authorities want to prosecute him, they won't extradite him until that process is finished?
I mean, it's complicated. I mean, the Germans could apply for extradition. They certainly could. I mean, I'm not sure what the process is. You would have to go possibly through Interpol, and then we'd have to entertain the idea of doing that. But I think that our prosecutors would be keen to prosecute him here. So I think that they might look askance on that request. Having said that, I think the Germans had to go this route. Markus Jooste spurned their summons to appear in court. So the prosecutors there wanted the arrest warrant, and I think that it was inevitable that they got it. But whether he actually appears in the court, I think the Germans might be less concerned about that if we prosecute him here in this country. If it's, say, 3 years down the line and that hasn't happened, then I think they would think again about enforcing it.
And Steinhoff, the company itself, limping along since 2017, now 2023, so 5.5 years later, finally a judge ordering enough of this. Was there really a chance that it was going to be able to trade its way out of the problem, the massive hole that this accounting fraud created?
Stephen, had all the chips fallen in its favor, it might have been able to trade through this. Had interest rates stayed very low, and when you consider that Steinhoff had 10 billion euros of debt, the interest on that debt is pretty immense, especially given the kind of risk profile Steinhoff had. So had interest rates stayed low, they might have just been able to cover the interest payments on that. Equally, their assets might have gained in value, and they might have been able to sell parts of it, such as Pepco, mattress firm in the US. So, if things had fallen in their favor, perhaps they might have been able to just get out of it. But the prevailing economic circumstances, higher interest rates, asset prices under pressure. I mean, Steinhoff, it would have been touch and go if the thing survived. But now it looks like it certainly isn't going to survive.
So it's got assets of 7 billion euros, and I keep seeing commentary that they're going to be sold off slowly. Why are they being sold off slowly? Are people hoping to get a better price if this process is drawn out?
Absolutely. I mean, the theory is that the prices of, say, European retailers are depressed at the moment because European interest rates are fairly high and going up. So when interest rates start to come down, the actual values of your retailers might increase, and the value of your assets would increase. It's the same with Pepco. Pepco, locally, it owns Ackermans, it owns Pep. It's a really strong retail chain, but its share price has come under pressure over the past year, like all our retailers, Pick n Pay, Shoprite, most especially Spar. So if things start to turn for the better in South Africa, well, then the value of Pepco will go up, and Steinhoff's assets will go up. But, you can only drag it out so long before the banks come calling and saying, well, we've given you enough rope. When are you going to pay us? And I think that time is now.
Who takes the pain? I mean, you've got 7 billion euros worth of assets, and you've got 10.2 billion euros of debt. Not a great mathematician, I've got to tell you, Rob, but even I can see there's around 3 billion euros that someone's going to have to pay for.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be you and me. As journalists, we are 3 billion euros are stashed somewhere else, right? But I can certainly tell you that it's the hedge funds who took on the risk in the first place and have been charging massive amounts of interest to Steinhoff for this, to cover this risk, who will, in the end of the day, say, well, we're going to have to write off 20% or 30% of our debt. But they have been getting large interest payments over the while from Steinhoff, so they have been making money and they have been pricing for the risk. But, Stephen, I do think it's important to say that in a free market system or capitalist system, you have to have companies that fail, and you have to have lenders, if they're charging you massive interest rates, well, then some companies must fail and they can't get their money back, and that's how it has to be. Because otherwise there's no justification for them charging these massive interest rates in the first place if all your debt is secure.
In other words, you've got to have risk in the system, otherwise people don't make proper decisions.
Why are they making immense rewards from Steinhoff, from the shareholders, if there's not going to be risk involved? So I think that the system only works if private sector companies can fail and lenders can lose their money. Otherwise, there's no incentive for anyone to be paying high interest rates on their debts. The banks charge you an interest rate on your home loan in case for the people who aren't able to pay those home loans. If they knew it was always going to be secure, they were always going to get their money, well, there's no justification for them to charge you large interest rates. So there must be failures to justify the rewards that these large companies make.
Has anything changed in the last 5 years since this massive fraud to stop another fraud like Steinhoff? And I know that the Independent Regulatory Board for Auditors has been talking this week about much bigger fines for auditors that essentially allow this to happen.
I was talking to them today about this particular issue. I mean, they feel that this will be an incentive, these larger fines for auditors, to stop, to ensure auditors are more careful when it comes to accounts like Steinhoff and ensure that there's greater professional skepticism. That might be true, but there's a whole lot of people in the system that failed in a case like Steinhoff. You had, auditors fail, you had internal auditors fail, you had the bankers fail, you had directors fail, you had audit committees fail. A lot of people failed. So you've got to make sure all the blocks in the chain are operating optimally. And the truth is that if you are able to close one particular gap here, there's still a chance that another gap will open up. And so there'll definitely be more corporate failures in time. It'll just perhaps not be in the same way that Steinhoff failed, but you'll certainly have it. We've been saying for, decades that this can't happen again with Enron, with Fidentia, with Regal Bank, and it has happened again, and it's become more and more gruesome each time it does happen, so it'll definitely happen again.
Rob Rose, thank you very much indeed. The editor at Financial Mail, really do appreciate the time.